The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is an episode that cemented itself into pop culture history. I'd place this one right up there with Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, Time Enough at Last, and To Serve Man in terms of popularity. I've been looking forward to covering this one for a while. The question is, has it stood the test of time? Well, let's get into it and find out. The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street was episode 22 from season 1, it was directed by Ronald Winston, and it was written by Rod Serling. As always, spoilers are ahead.
Maple Street, USA. Late summer. A tree-lined little world of front porch gliders, barbecues, the laughter of children, and the bell of an ice cream vendor. This is Maple Street on a late Saturday afternoon. Maple Street, in the last calm and reflective moment before the monsters came.
As our story opens, we get a final glimpse of Maple Street on a typical peaceful day. Everyone is going about their lives when a bizarre flash of light and shadow passes overhead.
What was that, a meteor?
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
Anxiety really begins to take hold when everyone realizes that their power is gone. Everything from the lights to the phones, appliances, lawnmowers, and even the portable radios are dead. Pete Van Horn volunteers to go to the next street over and see if they're having the same issues. So he takes his trusty hammer and heads off. Meanwhile, the neighbors begin gathering in the street to figure out what's going on. And it's here that we meet two of the larger players in this tale. First up, there's Steve Brand, as played by character actor Claude Akins, and Charlie Farnsworth, as played by Jack Weston. Both Claude Akins and Jack Weston would go on to star in two later Twilight Zone episodes, The Little People and The Bard. Steve decided to go into town for some answers, but he soon discovered even their cars weren't working. And it's here that things began to unravel. Tommy, a local boy and confirmed sci-fi fan, knew what was up because he'd read a story or two about alien invasions. Tommy claims the flash of light from earlier wasn't a meteor, it was a ship, and he even suggests aliens may already be among them, disguised as humans. And I love that after Tommy plants this ominous seed, we get a great panning shot of all the neighbors. The fact that the adults are swayed by this child may seem far-fetched, but even nowadays people are just as likely to believe all kinds of things from unreliable sources. Soon enough, Les Goodman, as played by Barry Atwater, falls under suspicion. His car mysteriously starts and stops all by itself, and this really gets people freaked out. Fortunately, we have Steve, who's the voice of reason in this crowd. He urges everyone to remain calm and not behave like a mob. But as the neighbors gather in front of Les's home, the accusations begin to fly. One woman notes she's seen him up late at night, standing in the yard, staring up at the sky, as if he were waiting for something. Les defends himself by stating that he's only guilty of insomnia, but by now, the damage has been done.
You scared, frightened rabbits, you.
As night falls, we see that Maple Street has devolved shockingly fast, and Charlie has become the self-appointed ringleader. When Steve calls out Charlie for his atrocious behavior, Charlie's pal Don steps in. He mentions that Steve's wife has been talking about a ham radio, which Steve has built in his basement, a radio which no one has ever seen. So, of course, the implication here is very clear.
I talked to monsters from outer space.
Ultimately, Steve warns everyone that this desperate search for a scapegoat is going to cause them to eat each other up alive. And right on cue, a mysterious figure emerges from the shadows. Tommy, of course, fires up the mob by claiming it's the monster. As the figure gets closer, trigger-happy Charlie grabs a shotgun and shoots the shadowy figure. By the time the crowd realizes it was only Pete Van Horn returning from his trip the next street over, it's too late. Pete Van Horn is dead. And this is where things really go bad for Charlie because now the lights in his house come on mysteriously, and he instantly becomes the new number one suspect. Charlie makes a run for his house, but by this point the whole neighborhood has completely turned on him. Charlie, being the stand-up guy that he is, decides the best way to get everyone off his back is to give the mob a whole new scapegoat.
It's Tommy! He's the one!
Oh, that's not true!
As the mob goes after Tommy, the lights and appliances flicker on in various houses. This causes all-out chaos as the now insane mob accuses each other. As we pull away, Maple Street descends into complete and total madness. And at this point, we get our Twilight Zone twist. On a nearby hilltop, it's revealed the shadow that flew overhead was an alien spaceship. And these aliens have been manipulating the neighborhood's power for their own nefarious purposes. So the conquest of Earth is already underway, one Maple Street at a time.
There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices, to be found only in the minds of men. For the record, prejudices can kill, and suspicion can destroy.
Earlier on, I posed the question, has the monsters on Maple Street stood the test of time? The easy answer for me is yes, it certainly has. Everything about this episode still holds up very well. And most importantly, the heavy themes which were covered still resonate. The direction from Ronald Winston is top-notch, and the performances are solid, with my two favorites being Claude Akins and Jack Weston. The conflict between these two characters in particular is more than enough reason to give this a watch. The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is widely known for its social commentary. In Rod's closing narration, he comments on the weaponization of thoughts, attitudes, and prejudices, and he even explicitly notes that a thoughtless, frightened search for a scapegoat has a fallout all of its own. Within the episode, we see this played out dramatically via a witch hunt that results in neighbor turning against neighbor and mob violence.
Charlie, there's a man lying dead in the street and you killed him. Does that look like a gag to you?
The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is clearly a product of its time. Back when Rod wrote this story, the civil rights movement was underway, racial tensions were high, Cold War hysteria was prevalent, and America was dealing with the impact of McCarthyism. For anyone unfamiliar with that term, it refers to Senator McCarthy, who led a heated campaign against alleged communists within the government and other institutions in the early 1950s. The accused were often blacklisted and lost their jobs. So the influences and message did come through loud and clear. Even though The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street may be from a different era, it remains relevant because history tends to repeat itself.
They pick the most dangerous enemy they can find, and it's themselves.
The aliens in this episode are aware of our weaknesses as humans and fully exploit it. Their divide and conquer approach works like a charm on the citizens of Maple Street. And when mob mentality runs rampant, well, as seen in this story, every minor action becomes questionable. If you're outside looking up at the stars, if you have a ham radio you put together in your basement, or even if you're innocently walking home, all of these things instantly become suspect. This episode demonstrates that if you allow fear to cloud reason and insist on seeing someone as the enemy, then finding reasons and excuses to justify your agenda becomes shockingly easy. The setting of this story is perfect and gives even more weight to the theme. We have an idyllic early 1960s suburban neighborhood. All seems well, yet this little community completely crumbles overnight. And even if this classic Leave It to Beaver backdrop isn't as familiar to us nowadays, the sad truth is, this fear-driven, accusatory mob mentality can still cause destruction in any modern setting. That, in and of itself, is a key point Rod was trying to make. The events which unfold in this morality tale can happen anywhere, in any town, or any neighborhood, and at any time. On that note, there's a quote from Rod Serling which ties in very well with this episode. With the Twilight Zone, I have, with varying degrees of success or failure, attempted to touch upon moral themes utilizing the device of the parable. In other words, I have tried to insert subtly what I hope to be a message, but couched it in such a manner that it becomes almost an unconscious effect. Hence, I will tell a story about an invasion from outer space, but tell it with an implicit suggestion that human beings are prone to inordinate suspicions and prejudices about things that are different. In terms of trivia, I did want to mention a few things. The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street isn't just another popular, critically acclaimed Twilight Zone. Its reach has expanded far beyond fandom. Over the years, there's been theatrical productions, it's been reprinted many times, and there's even a 2009 graphic novel adapted by Mark Neese. But it's also an episode that has served as an educational tool. After it originally aired, numerous teachers and college professors contacted CBS and requested everything from 60mm prints to copies of the script for use in their curriculum. I can even speak to this from personal experience because back in junior high school, I recall we read the stage play of The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. I believe I was even lucky enough to play the part of Steve, which is fitting because we have pretty much the same sense of humor.
What we need to do is run a check of the neighborhood and find out which ones of us are really human.
Also of note, according to the Twilight Zone, unlocking the door to a television classic from Martin Grahams Jr., when this script was adapted for stories from the Twilight Zone, Rod Serling expanded on the conclusion of the episode. In the retelling, he described that a sunrise revealed dead bodies scattered about the streets and porches. So the fallout really was hammered home. Serling went on to note that following the carnage, all new residents arrived to move in, and they were aliens with two heads. Lastly, the revival series featured a 2003 remake titled The Monsters Are on Maple Street. Whereas in the original, the fear of aliens served as an allegory for the anti-communist sentiment and other issues of that era, the remake served as a commentary on the rising fear of terrorism, which reached a boiling point in the immediate post-9/11 era. On my latest repeat viewing, I did notice this tale is very fast-paced. We don't get much in the way of life prior to the crisis. For the most part, we slip right into the chaos from the get-go. Now it all works anyway, we get character development throughout the ordeal. But perhaps a bit more time up front to establish the players may have been helpful. My second minor gripe is simply that the aliens at the end appear as humans. I think it would have been interesting if they appeared more clearly alien. Serling made note of two-headed aliens in his adaptation, so that would have been great to see on screen. However, these minor gripes in no way detracted from the impact of this story. We're meant to reflect on the actions of the people of Maple Street, and hopefully consider the lessons of this tale. This is a true classic, and I highly recommend it. I'd rate The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street 5 out of 5 shadowy Pete Van Horns. If you've seen this episode and have your own thoughts, let me know about it in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this, hit like, hit that notification bell, and hit sub if you haven't already. It really helps, and I totally appreciate it. Until next time, stay safe, be well, later.